Hi there, I'm Spira. Welcome to my channel. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about why therapy and medication are not always the best options for complex PTSD, or we also call it complex trauma. So the thing is, when we have this issue, oftentimes people assume that this is a psychological issue. Now, granted, there are psychological side effects from this, but it's really a brain injury. It's a neurological injury. It's an injury of the limbic system of the brain. And that can affect the prefrontal cortex of the brain, which is in the front, and that's responsible for executive functioning, decision-making, logic, planning for the future, etc. So we've talked a little bit about regulating the nervous system, but that is considered a somatic modality, which means through the body. And you actually don't get that from a therapist. You can learn that anywhere. You can learn it right here from YouTube videos. But the reason why therapy doesn't always help is, well, that's a part of it. So the thing is, when you are still going day to day with this constant dysregulation, constant fight or flight, your prefrontal cortex is compromised, so that you're not always thinking, well, maybe you have brain fog. You know, it depends on the severity of your trauma or how far along you are in your healing process. So when you're in therapy, you know, they can teach you some regulation tools and things like that. And oftentimes people love cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy. And both of those are really great. But if your brain isn't really functioning optimally, you will not be able to really assimilate that information. And the other thing is that in therapy or in the therapeutic environment, talking about trauma doesn't heal it. So there are other psychological issues that people might have where talk therapy can really help, but talking about your trauma is not required to heal from your trauma. In fact, you can completely heal from trauma without ever telling your story, without ever talking about it. And the danger in talking about it is that you can dysregulate in the middle of a therapy session. I've done it a million times. So you don't need to put yourself through that. You don't need to put your body through that. You don't need to put yourself through that. Now, on the other hand, medication is helpful for certain things. So obviously, people with complex trauma and complex PTSD will often have depression and anxiety and ADHD even as what we call comorbid disorders. And basically what that means is they're along for the ride. Now, if you can heal the trauma, you can generally heal the depression and the anxiety, but not always. And so sometimes antidepressants can be useful. The only thing that can be wrong in a situation like that, and also I should mention for anxiety, usually the medications that are prescribed for anxiety are benzodiazepines, so Valium, Xanax, lorazepam, Ativan. And those are great when you need a fix, when you need a quick fix. However, what happens with those medications is that they have a tendency to numb you, and what they do is they dampen those strong feelings. But the thing is, in order to heal from trauma, we have to be able to feel that emotional dysregulation so that we can learn how to regulate again. And so the more medication that you're on to dampen those feelings, and that includes antidepressants as well, then the less opportunities you have to rewire your brain so that you can eventually come out of that. Now, it's a long process, and healing trauma is not going to happen overnight. It can take years, but I would say to be patient. And if you need medication, you need medication. You know, there's absolutely no reason to deny medication and say, oh no, I don't want any. If your psychiatrist insists that you need it in this specific situation, then yes, you do. Now, please don't take this as medical advice. What I am not here to tell you is don't take medication. I would never ever say that to anyone. I actually do take some medications myself, and one of them I take as needed, and I actually don't need it a lot. That would actually be the one for anxiety. I only use it in absolute emergencies, and that works for me. It really does work for me, because for me, most of the time, I can do one of the other techniques that I'm already familiar with, and that at this point I've been practicing for a while, so it's great. The other thing is that sometimes we do need a little bit of an antidepressant, maybe to get us through a certain time period, and then you can continue with the other things without it, eventually coming off of it. But that's true for everyone. Everyone that goes on antidepressants, the hope is that you'll use it as a tool to kind of get you through a rough time so that you can eventually come off of it. They're not created for people to stay on them forever. Unfortunately, there are many people who use them as a crutch, and they just find it a lot easier to pop a pill than to do the work. So if that's you, then no judgment. You probably wouldn't be watching this video, in fact. So that's fine. So now let's talk about what the options are. There are many alternative modalities that are very successful in healing trauma. Now the thing is that there are many, and I can list off a few here, but I won't get into deep explanations because I really just wanted to focus on the reasons why therapy and medications are not as effective as people think, even though they are oftentimes the first line of defense. I would venture to say that 99% of the time, they're the first line of defense. You don't feel good, things aren't, happening the way that you want, so we go to a psychologist. That's the automatic reaction usually. But the truth is that the evidence shows that it's a bottom-up approach that works best. And what that means is through the body first and then the brain. So I think therapy is great and it can be very effective, and I'm a firm believer in therapy. However, when I go to therapy, I don't talk about my trauma. I might talk about it a little bit in the beginning if I'm seeing a new therapist, but I don't need to get into a lot of details. What I go to therapy for is some of the other things. Just learning other types of skills, especially like cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy, which I do think are effective. So if that is your route, then that is your route, and that's the one you should take. But just keep in mind that the most successful evidence-based modalities work with the body first. So things like EMDR, yoga, mindfulness exercises, so mind-body practices, a lot of physical stuff too, even just really good physical exercise. Like if you're a runner, you can try running. And you know what, if you're not in great shape and the thought of jogging sounds terrifying to you, just think about anything that would kind of wear you out. So dance in your living room. Because for some people, especially if you're really, really out of shape, dancing can be enough to wear you out. That's a pretty intense physical exercise, and you have control over how strong you move. Even just a good power walk can be really, really helpful. So some kind of physical exercise is always recommended. The mind-body practices can really help a person become more cognizant, more aware. You can definitely get more in touch with your body, connect with your body, understand your symptoms, understand when you're becoming dysregulated, and that kind of stuff. So it's really important to do certain types of activities that will connect you with your physical body. Okay, that is it. I wanted to keep it short and sweet. I just wanted to talk briefly about why therapy and medications are not the best for treating trauma. So if you liked the video, if you found it helpful, please hit the like button. And if you want to see more videos like this, then hit the subscribe button. I try to put out a video once a week, if not twice a week. And I'm happy to see you here. So join me on my journey. Have a beautiful day. and namaste.